Hello, Griffins. I hope you're having a great day. We're going to go in and jump through the rest of the U.S. history notes today. So we're going to try and get to the end of the semester. Hopefully, we can accomplish that goal. Let's jump over to classroom. Again, in a previous video, I already explained what you're supposed to do here. See that some people have already turned it in. That's great. You're basically done with the semester, so you're off the hook. You get it turned in, then that sweet relief hits, and the sensation of summer break is coming. So turn the stuff in, get it over with. Why not? So I'm not going to explain what to do here. The directions are written out, pretty easy to understand. Email me if you have issues, or go back and watch that video from last Monday where I explained what to do with the rest of the year materials. All right, let's open this thing up in Google Slides so we can see the speaker notes. It's going to be nice next year that I'll already have these in here. I believe we left off right at the Clinton years. Bill Clinton wins the election in 1992. So despite the successes that H.W. Bush had had with that war in Panama and the Gulf War, the fighting only lasted about a month in Panama, and the Gulf War, similar, was a very short war. So it looked like H.W. Bush was a very successful commander-in-chief, but unfortunately, the economy had slowed. Bill Clinton is going to surge in, and H.W. Bush has Ross Perot to deal with. Ross Perot is going to run a very similar campaign to H.W. Bush and ends up stealing a lot of these Republican voters, which allows Clinton to win some states where you're like, maybe he probably wouldn't have won that without Ross Perot screwing over H.W. Bush here, like Georgia. It's a state that's usually pretty easy for Republicans to win. The Clinton years. The economy is going to boom. Bill Clinton is going to luck into one of the best economies of all time, and that's because the internet is going to be created and totally change how we live and buy things. So Clinton is kind of trying to find the right balance between bumping taxes up to a realistic level and find a way to regulate the internet as it becomes more important to our economy. This during the 90s, you're going to see the NASDAQ and like most stock trading go completely digital. You don't have to be on the floor of the stock exchange down in New York City to buy stock. In fact, most people just do it through the internet. And that's been the case since Clinton's presidency. Clinton was opposed heavily by the Republicans in Congress, particularly Newt Gingrich. He was the Republican Speaker of the House, and they basically vowed to not let Clinton get anything done. That was his main job. Newt Gingrich, similar to kind of like a Mitch McConnell type politician, was the obstructionist. He saw his job as not really passing laws, but more stopping the other side from passing laws. So Clinton is not going to be able to accomplish a lot of the goals he set for himself in his inaugural address and on the campaign trail when he was running. A lot of the things he wants to do don't happen. Like he wanted universal health care. That ends up not happening. He ramps up gun control. That's something that had a little more success, but still, Clinton's not able to achieve all the goals he wanted to as president because the Republican-controlled Congress was basically stopping everything that he wanted to do. They were not going to pass laws that he wanted them to pass. But the good news is despite our Congress being kind of incapable and not accomplishing a whole lot, the economy is in the dot-com boom. That's where, the rise of the internet happens, the dot-com bubble. Clinton is also going to be the last president to have a budget surplus, as in we were making more money than we were spending. That's no longer the case. You can see, particularly in the 08 recession, when that hit, then the early parts of the Obama years, we were spending so much money, and taxes were not making enough to cover our expenses. But during the Clinton years, however, we had a surplus. In fact, he left the office in 2000 with a pretty healthy surplus here of 200. I'm guessing that's probably $1 billion would be my guess as to the numbers used here. Whereas, nowadays, the Obama and the Trump years, our deficits, is insane. This year in particular, because of the coronavirus stimulus packages and all that jazz, we're going to have a humongous deficit. Clinton surplus, though, that's nice. That's a redeeming quality of his presidency. The economy soars because the internet's going to completely change everything. It's going to change how we live and buy things, how we sell things. The dot-com bubble here is creeping up. And by, I remember 1997, I would have been a little kid, probably I would have been first grade, I guess, second grade. I think first or second grade. And I remember we had computer classes where we'd get on the internet and, some of those sites that I was going to way back in the day still exist. Sites like Google, the search engine. I remember Google was like the cool thing at our elementary school. Everybody was like, have you seen the search engine? It's crazy. You can find anything. You can find anything. Prior to that, people were using these crappier search engines like Ask Jeeves. Yahoo is a company that most Americans were setting as their front page. So when they'd open up the internet, it would go to yahoo.com, which still exists, although they've merged and been bought and sold. But this used to be the front page of a lot of people's internet, was Yahoo, kind of a news sort of, it's almost like a magazine on the internet, basically. So a lot of the companies that are still around today were started during this dot-com bubble, as in the dot-com boom. They called it a bubble because eventually it burst, and the economy suffered quite a bit there in the early 2000s as the bubble had burst due to over-speculation. So there's tech startups, like I mentioned, Yahoo, Google, Amazon starts during this time period. These are companies that now are like, trillion-dollar enterprises that were started and completely took advantage of the fact that most Americans use the internet. And that starts in the 90s. I feel like the first time I remember getting on the internet was probably like 1995 or 6. And it was at school in a computer class. Gingrich and Clinton, here they are, two rivals. Newt Gingrich vowed to the American people that the conservative right and the Republicans would not allow Bill Clinton to accomplish his liberal left-wing goals. And the Republicans were looking for any chance they could get to impeach Bill Clinton, similar to how Democrats are currently treating Donald Trump. They're looking for any chance they can get to try and impeach the guy. And that was the case with Clinton. He is indeed later impeached because it's discovered that he's been having an affair with one of his staffers, Monica Lewinsky. So she worked for Bill Clinton in the White House, and they were having an extramarital affair. He told her to lie about it in an affidavit, and that's illegal. That's obstruction of justice, which is what he's charged with. They also try and charge him with perjury. So he is impeached by the House, which means that there would be a trial in the Senate. The Senate gets to act as the jury. So the House impeached him. He was impeached, but he was not removed from office. The Senate found him innocent. And it was a pretty hardline party vote. The Republicans in the Senate all voted that he was guilty. He did something wrong here. And the Democrats all voted not guilty. He's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong here. Cheating on your wife's a bad thing, but it's not technically a crime. But telling someone to lie in an affidavit is a crime. So Clinton is let off the hook and kind of tries to sweep this affair under the rug, and it damages his image quite a bit. But he does try and sweep this whole thing under the rug because he's found innocent in the impeachment, and it's like, all right, America, we're back to our booming economy. Let's focus on something that's not my relationship with my wife and other strange women. Let's focus on the economy, America. So he tries to sweep it under the rug and remind Americans that things are going well. Here's Clinton's policies that mostly fail because Newt Gingrich and the Republicans shut him down, and to try and overturn all the stuff he wants to accomplish through executive, if he's going to do this through executive order, Congress is going to write a law that basically says, no, this executive order doesn't matter anymore. and in which case, he could veto that, but then they could override the veto. So the Congress really kind of had him where they wanted him. He wants to get universal health care, for Americans, but that plan fails. That's something that's still attached to the Democratic Party and has been since Clinton's time in the 90s. Clinton promotes gun control, and that does have some Republican support initially. So there are several, gun laws passed in the 90s that were a pretty big deal. Clinton seeks to help newly independent Eastern Bloc countries and newly democratic Russian Federation. So yes, the Soviet Union's fell, the Cold War is over. So let's help out our new democracies over in Eastern Europe, and let's help out Russia. So yes, an old enemy becomes a friend again. The U.S. is going to become involved in a civil war in the Balkans. That's because when the Soviet Union fell and Yugoslavia subsequently falls, all these different ethnicities in Yugoslavia want to form their own little country. However, the remnants of the Yugoslav government don't want to let that happen. They want to keep all these different ethnicities into one united Yugoslavia. That's ultimately not going to be the case. The Americans would jump in with the United Nations on the side of these independent countries. Sorry, just got an email. I have to look at that later. So yes, we step in and fight against the Yugoslav army, Yugoslav army, and try and help create the free countries of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Albania, which does happen. All these countries are kind of released and become independent, in part thanks to the United Nations and the U.S. stepping in to destroy the former Yugoslav army that was trying to keep, basically a single-party dictatorship, communist-type vibe going. We don't want that. Nobody wants that, except for them, I suppose. Clinton is going to be involved in the Middle East, and that's a trend you've seen since, the Richard Nixon years, which is that the United States is increasingly, with each president, more and more involved in the Middle East. Clinton, he promotes this Camp David summit. He doesn't really promote it. I mean, he just hosts it at Camp David, which is one of the president's, that's his secret retreats vacation spot. Also, there's an underground bunker there to keep him safe in the event that the United States is under attack. So Clinton doesn't really promote it. He just hosts the Camp David summit between Israel and Palestine. Their leaders, Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, are going to come over and meet and try and come up with a peaceful resolution to the conflict, the ongoing conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict. The fight against terrorism is going to grow under Clinton's presidency because the United States is attacked by terrorists at the World Trade Center in 1993. This is not 9/11. Yes, this building was attacked by terrorists twice in history. The first time it happened was in the 90s, 1993. Some dude put a bomb in a van and then parked it in the parking garage and blew it up. And it did some structural damage to the building. And, so there are some deaths here. Let's wiki this. There are 6 deaths and 1,000 people injured. This is what the underground little parking garage area looked like after that bomb had exploded. So that was the first terrorist attack in the World Trade Center. And say, well, why do they care so much about this World Trade Center? What do they want to bomb that for? Well, the terrorists view it as, this is kind of the heart of the American economy here. The World Trade Center is. The Arab-Israeli conflict is ongoing. It still is today. The deal that was reached with the Camp David summit and then later the Oslo Accords was that Palestinians would be allowed to govern themselves in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So Israel's like, all right, we still technically own this land, but we will let you run your own government in it. Congrats. Palestinians are obviously, okay, I guess that's a step in the right direction, but not ideal. We'd rather just be free and you call us Palestine, we'd be our own country. You don't own the land anymore. So the fighting between the Israelis and the Palestinians does continue, mostly because Palestinians feel like this was not enough. They didn't get enough. Sure, they can run their own government, but it's not enough. They want to be free and independent of Israel. Here's Yasser Arafat. He's going to have to deal with the fact that the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Hezbollah, another group that's the United States views as a terrorist group, they're not happy with this agreement. They think Palestinians deserve more. They want an independent Palestine. That's problematic for Israel because they still want to technically own this land, and they don't want to agree to, you know, call this what it is, call it Palestine. Here's the World Trade Center bombing. It's the first of two major terrorist attacks at this building, the one of the Twin Towers. Terrorism in modern America. So this is where it's going to start getting weird. Osama bin Laden. You may remember that as the guy we were formerly calling, he was a freedom fighter helping us fight the Soviets over in Afghanistan. This guy, anti-Soviet warrior, puts his army on the road to peace. Well, I guess that road was kind of rocky, and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are extremist organizations that have a very, very strict interpretation of Islam that's really not popular with Muslims, but they've kind of weaponized it into brainwashing these fanatics to join their little terrorist group. The group Al-Qaeda is going to attack the World Trade Center so this is the second attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 9/11. There was also a plane that crashed out in a field. It's believed that plane was probably going for the White House or perhaps the Capitol building. So this was a massive organized attack on the United States. Americans were shocked as they heard the news that morning. Pretty much everyone remembers where they were when they first heard what was going on in 9/11. I was in my 6th grade social studies class with Mrs. Patton, who's now the principal over at Nelson Elementary. So I was in her 6th grade social studies class when, I could see that teachers were kind of walking around in the hallway. Like our teacher just left our classroom unattended without saying anything, which normally doesn't happen. And it wasn't like she just walked outside the door and stood in the hallway and talked to somebody. Like that was more normal. It was like she completely just picked up the phone, her classroom phone. Most people still didn't have cell phones then. And just walked right out the door. And then she came back several minutes later and was like, something's going on in New York City. Something hit one of the buildings on fire, and they don't know what's going on. That time, none of us knew it was a terrorist attack. We thought it was an accident. Later that morning, my mom came down, who taught in the same building. She was taught 8th grade up on the 3rd floor of Lincoln Middle School, so it was weird to see her down on the 1st floor where the 6th graders were. She came down and told me, she's like, something's going on and we might cancel school today. So come up to my classroom if that happens and I'll drive you home. Don't ride the bus. And so I was like, all right, something serious is happening. So by the time, later in the day we had heard, I remember at lunchtime kids were like, I think it was planes hit the building. That's what happened. So I didn't really know the full story until I got home and saw that this was not an accident at all. It was a very organized terrorist attack on the United States. Pretty much everybody remembers where they were that day, and it was shocking. So the new president, George W. Bush, he won the 2000 election. So the second of the Bush presidents, he is going to direct our military in a war against Afghanistan, against Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. So our goal is to dismantle Al-Qaeda. We want to locate and kill bin Laden, which we finally do in 2011. So it takes us a decade to track this guy down. He was hiding out in Pakistan when we finally got to him. But that was one of the original goals of this war in Afghanistan, was find and punish this man who attacked us. Despite efforts to promote democracy in Afghanistan, it's not going well for us. The government's still very unstable, and the region's still threatened by terrorist groups like, ISIS and various, the Taliban's still there. Thousands would die instantly as the planes crashed into the building, and many more would, I don't want to say thousands would die instantly, probably hundreds died instantly, and then thousands later would die as the buildings collapsed. Shocking stuff that I wasn't watching it live on TV, but I know I've talked to other people, like my other coworkers at McGivney, and they remember they were sitting in a classroom, and the teacher had it on TV, and they actually saw the buildings fall on TV. So there's video footage of it out there. I'd encourage you to watch a documentary about 9/11 at some point in your life, just because it's such a turning point in American history. A lot of first responders poured into these buildings to try and help the initial survivors, but unfortunately, as the building collapsed, many of these first responders died. And then later, as these guys were working around this pile to try and continue to maintain people's safety, they're breathing in this building material that's on fire, and that's very bad for your lungs. A lot of these guys get respiratory problems and cancer, and that's something that they're still trying to get their health insurance from the government. Thankfully, last year we agreed to, I think, give it to them in perpetuity, as in forever, the rest of their lives. The government will foot any medical expenses that they have. That's because of them having respiratory issues. So the first responders become kind of a rallying cry, and America vows to never forget. This was when, that September and October of 2001, every front porch in America had a flag going. We were waving the stars and bars, and we were, on a mission to get our revenge, punish this person, dismantle terrorism, and never forget the heroes of 9/11. The war in Afghanistan is ongoing. There are soldiers serving in it right now that weren't born when 9/11 even happened, when the starting point of the war, the reason we're there in the first place, when it happened. So there are, 18-year-old soldiers over in Afghanistan right now that, yes, were born after 9/11. And this seems like the never-ending story here. It's gone on and on and on. And, at what point what does a win in Afghanistan look like? Yes, the Forever War. If you guys read 1984, I believe there's a quote in that book. We've always been at war with what is it, East Asia or Eurasia or something. So the Forever War. Maybe we should probably do something about this. Terrorists use guerrilla tactics similar to the Viet Cong to blend in, ambush, and booby trap areas with IEDs. That's why a lot of servicemen, not a lot, but that's why there's more servicemen in the war in Afghanistan and in Iraq that end up losing a leg, because the terrorists use, much like the Viet Cong, booby traps. They improvise explosive devices, plant them on the side of the road, and you step on it or your car drives over it, it's going to explode and possibly sever a limb off your body. So in Afghanistan and Iraq, more than really any other American war, you see, a lot of guys come back with, they're missing a leg. Here's, just a terrorist group. Here's them in their military uniforms. But a lot of times, they aren't going to wear these out in the open. They're going to try and blend in with civilians and attack you when you least suspect it. George W. Bush, probably the most memeable president of all time. There's just so many strange moments with this guy where you're like, what just came out of his mouth? What did he just say? There was that time a dude threw a shoe at him. There was the time he didn't know how to use the phone and was talking into it backwards. He frequently referred to the internet as the internets, which was just glorious. People were like, "Is this guy a moron or what? Is he messing with us?" He tells America, you got to rally behind me, though. If we want to win this war against terrorism, you got to rally behind me so that we can get a win over in Afghanistan and then later Iraq. He was criticized pretty harshly by the media for a lot of his verbal gaffes, though, for a lot of just the strange things, like the time where he said, I believe human being and fish can coexist peacefully. You're like, what does that even mean, dude? So he had a lot of verbal gaffes. He's kind of like Joe Biden. A lot of strange stuff coming out of this guy's mouth. The Iraq War would last. It's another lengthy war in the Middle East. We invade Iraq in 2003 to remove Saddam Hussein from power. We're concerned that he's got weapons of mass destruction. We later don't find these, so the whole point of this war is kind of controversial. A lot of people that were for it then later flip-flop and end up being against the war. as we realize that we're probably destabilizing the region. And Saddam Hussein is a bad guy, yes, and it's good that we got him out of power, but there might just be a new bad guy to step in and lead Iraq. So ensuring that democracy stays in Iraq is pretty difficult for us. And, at times, like ISIS controlled huge chunks of the country. That's not good. So we fight in Iraq for nearly 8 years, and our goal is to get Saddam Hussein out of there, establish a democracy, fight these terrorist groups, and hopefully, get a stable country that will trade oil with us. That's we would very much like that stability and good oil prices. But unfortunately, we don't really get a lot of these things. There's a democracy in Iraq, yes, but it's pretty shaky at best, and in 2014, ISIS controlled like half the country. So we're like, is their government really even legitimate in this region? We return and fight ISIS in 2014. That wasn't any fun. So yeah, when I was graduating high school, that was right around what they called the troop surge, and these military recruiters were like harassing me and my family to try and get me to sign up. They needed more troops, so the troop surge that. Yeah, so the troop surge in 2007. So that would have been the fall of my senior year. Graduated in 08. So the troop surge, they were looking for guys to join the military. They would just straight up tell you, they're like, if you join the military, you'll have enough money to buy a brand new F-150. Okay, right off the bat, we'll just give you money. You can buy a car with it or a truck. And they were really trying to push you and sell you on joining the military, but I was not interested in joining the military personally, because I wanted to be a school teacher, and I didn't really feel that a military career was right for me at 18 years old. And now that I'm old, I'm old, I realize that I was totally right about that I don't know that the military would have been the right choice for me personally. It's hard to say, because by the time you guys, you're going to experience this too. By the time you guys are turning 18 and about to graduate, military recruiters will hit you up. They will call you. They will figure out your cell phone number. They will call you. They will text you. They want you to join. That's their job, is to recruit people. It was massive recruiting there as I was turning 18. The WMD report. Here was the report that was presented to the United Nations. We didn't find what we were looking for when we got over there. These really big trucks and suspicious vehicles turned out to be a whole big nothing burger. Nothing was found. The intelligence reports were fraudulent, and the public was misled about this whole thing. And in Iraq, we find that the United Nations doesn't really want to help us with this one. Afghanistan, we had this huge multinational coalition, Let's see who came with us. In Afghanistan, our original invasion, the UK, our good friends the Brits, we can always count on. Canada's with us. Thanks, Canada. Australia's with us. Thanks, Australia. Germany's with us. Really suspicious missing person here is Israel. Come on, guys. We back you up all these time, and then finally we could use your help, and Israel doesn't show up. Real shame. They could have helped out. Where did the Kiwis? Did New Zealand not come with us this go-around? They're almost always with us as well. I guess they didn't. It's okay. They helped us out in the initial Persian Gulf War. Let's look at the coalition for the war in Iraq. See who's with us again. Thanks. The British, always count on them. Australia again. Thanks. Thanks, Aussies. Poland stepping up to the bat. Thanks, Poles. Polish people. I don't know if you call them Poles or not. I believe that's still acceptable. I'm not entirely sure, though. Sorry, apologize about that. If you're supposed to call them like Polish people instead of Poles. Canada is going to support us, but not as much as they did previously. The Netherlands and Italy are also going to support us. So, Iraq, we don't have this multinational coalition. We don't really have the support of the United Nations. We get over, and it's very hard to track down where Saddam Hussein is. He's fled out to the countryside and is actually living in a hole in the ground. like a literal hole in the ground. That's where we find him. Here's the photograph of the squad that found him. I believe this guy was court-martialed and punished because because they took this photograph. They were instructed, if you find him, don't take any photos of him, and especially don't grab him by the shoulders and smile like it's some sort of weird selfie. Don't do that. But he did. Saddam Hussein is tried. He's found guilty of crimes against humanity. He had been gassing the Kurds since the 90s. We knew this guy was doing evil stuff. Just the one thing we didn't know was that he didn't actually have the weapons of mass destruction that we suspected he did. So he's hanged, and all the statues of him around the country are torn down. Another recent trend in American history is natural disasters are becoming increasingly costly and devastating. The Mississippi River flooding back in '93, maybe you've heard stories about that. I was very young, so I don't remember this personally, but my parents have told me stories about it. The river flooded, and it was like high water levels. We're talking like about the highest it's ever been in modern history. It cost $15 billion. Entire towns are destroyed because of how high the water came. It came up, flooded their whole town, and ruined it. Hurricane Katrina is going to hit New Orleans in 2005. I don't know what category, strength of a hurricane this was, but it was a strong one, and they knew it was going to be bad. They instructed people in New Orleans, probably leave the city. This is going to get really bad. And what they didn't know was that the levee system was going to completely break. The entire city would flood. And 1,500 people die because of a natural disaster. Out in the western United States, wildfires have become increasingly problematic. As global warming is my nose is itching like crazy. As global warming is, it's making these problems worse. As in hurricane season is, it's like each season we're getting Category 5 like strong hurricanes almost every year now. Wildfires in western states is a similar deal. Global warming. It's hotter out. It's drier out. And that's problematic in forests because, wildfires, much like the one in Australia, can be very difficult to manage and destroy whole towns. And it's obviously bad for the environment because a lot of little critters live out in the forest, and if it burns down, they don't have much where else to live. So as the planet's been warming, we're kind of more susceptible to the flooding, the wildfires, and a stronger hurricane season. The flood of '93, we've got a whole town underwater here. The church steeple and its roof and top part of it, most of these houses are about up to the roof underwater. So that's not good. When the water level goes back down, these people are going to return and find that, everything's destroyed. Their house is no longer livable. And in Alton in '93, the water came halfway up the hill. I don't know if you guys have been to Alton. You can drive around and find the high water mark that people mark it out on the street and say this was how high the water came. So Alton was one of the many towns that during the '93 flood experienced a lot of property damage. Hurricane Katrina, this was just an absolute wreck. The whole city was destroyed. They told people, come on down to the Superdome where the New Orleans Saints played, and they said, we'll be safe here. Don't worry, guys. Come on down here. If your house is underwater, come on down to the Superdome. It's only a couple feet underwater, so that's not bad. And then they realized we can't keep these people here. This building is not safe currently. Get them out. It was a wreck. They started trying to bus these people up to like Alabama or something. Or Mississippi. That it was a mess. Looters will be shot. There was issues with looting during Hurricane Katrina because pretty much it's hard to police an area when there's a natural disaster occurring. So a lot of people's homes were destroyed. Everything they had worked to build up, their businesses were destroyed. And unfortunately for New Orleans, a lot of people leave and they don't come back because everything they had there was destroyed by Katrina. a map of just wildfires in California. You know, you can see there's wildfires every year. The one out in Australia this year was like a historically bad one, but the United States has had our own problems with wildfires recently because it's just every year is hotter than the last. But I think this year, although you know I say it and it's like like only 55 degrees out or something right now, every year it's getting hotter, and I believe we are on. Uh, I believe we're en route for another record hottest hottest year again. Yeah, I'll have to look at that another time. So yeah, global warming. It's not good. It's not good. Now people obviously argue about is it caused by is it a man-made problem? Can we even manage it? And just my personal opinion, yes, it's a man-made problem. We've contributed to global warming by basically carbon emissions, things like that. And yeah, there are things we could do to mitigate it and should do. That's my personal opinion, though, that some people might think that's controversial. I'm not like a Green New Deal person. I don't, some of that's maybe a little more extreme than I would go. But we got to take care of the environment. And if we do that, we probably are going to find that a lot of these natural disasters, aren't going to be as strong as if we can somehow mitigate the environmental problems that are caused by global warming by controlling our emissions. It'd be probably the easiest thing to do. Green energy. The boom and bust economy. Yeah, that's how things go now. We boom and we bust. That's how we like it. I'm just kidding. We don't like the bust part. In fact, who knows? We may be entering another bust part. In '08, the Great Recession was one of the worst busts in the economic history of the United States. The housing market, there was a bubble there. People had bought houses they couldn't actually afford, and banks were giving out loans to anyone willy-nilly. They weren't checking these people's credentials to see, can this person actually afford this house? They just go, whatever. We'll give it out. A lot of the stuff's government backed anyways, or we could just trade these mortgages on the stock market, which that turns out to be very problematic. Watch the movie The Big Short. It's a fantastic movie. That's all about this Great Recession. It does have some bad words in it though, so maybe look out for that. So I can't truly recommend that, but it's a good one. The Big Short, all about the '08 recession. So the lack of government oversight on banking and businesses and how people could blend these mortgages. They could blend people's mortgages into stocks and into the stock market and trade them. And that's problematic because that's a huge risk, especially now that we know, hindsight's 2020, but now we know that a lot of these people couldn't afford that mortgage. They could not afford to stay in that house for long. So yes, it's discovered that a lot of America had borrowed too much money. Companies were going to lay off workers. The current economy has slowly recovered. And we were in boom times before Corona came along and maybe is going to bust us again. But yeah, we were in a economic, a historic economic boom. The economy was going great, and that's Donald Trump. That's his main calling card. As he wants to get reelected, he's going to say, "Look, we had the best economy in the world." I didn't want to shut it down. It's a health crisis. Had to do something, and that's going to be the ongoing issue for the next couple months is reopening the economy in phases is what Illinois plans to do. That's what a lot of states are planning to do. So how are we going to get back to our booming economy? And if we wait too long, is it going to bust the economy? I don't know. I'm not an economist, and I don't work in the state government, so it's not my call to make. I have opinions on it, but I'm not going to share them. I'm just going to keep my opinions to myself, which I think is something that a lot of people out there, particularly on social media, maybe they should just keep their opinion to themselves. That would be maybe something they should do. If they feel that strongly about it, maybe contact your senator or your state representative. You don't need to be spewing this vitriolic BS all over the internet. There's so many conspiracy theories and crap like that out there now. It's just frustrating. It's just frustrating, I tell you. The recession in '08 is going to convince a large chunk of Americans, mostly young Americans, that we bail out big businesses when things go bad for the really rich people, the people who own banks. The government bails them out. What about when things go bad for the rest of us? Why don't we get bailed out? You know, that was the banks were too big to fail. We can't let them fail. Ford, GM, they're too big. We can't let them fail. Let's pump trillions of dollars into these companies. Let's just print it. The Federal Reserve will print this money and just give it to these companies. Some of these bailouts were, hindsight again, we're like, maybe this wasn't the best thing to do to try and fight off the recession. And meanwhile, here we are doing it again. We're doing more corporate bailouts. So yeah, there was this whole Occupy Wall Street movement where people were like, the 1%, the richest 1% of America, these 1%ers are taking advantage of the rest of us. That when things go bad for them and when the economy dips for them, they just have the government print them money. When things go bad for us, however, the government isn't going to print us any money. If I call up James Powell or Jim Powell or whatever his name is, the chair of the Federal Reserve, he's not going to know me. He's not going to care about me, print me any money. So that's been a kind of an ongoing trend, is the 1%ers. Are they taking advantage of the American taxpayer? Do these companies like Amazon that pay like zero taxes, is that fair? Can we start, taxing some of these corporations? Are corporations people? That was an issue that the Supreme Court found, yes, a corporation has the rights of a person. It's like, that's kind of, that's interesting. So, yes, as is the economy, essentially with this movement, the question was, is the economy rigged? Is it rigged to keep the rich people super rich and they get more and more of the money to themselves while the poor get poorer and poorer? That's a question that you'd have to ask an economist about that one. Is the income inequality and the wealth distribution in the United States fair? It's an interesting question. There's the end of the notes. So that's going to catch you up to mostly modern times. I think for next year, I probably will have to include a little bit more. I could probably get into maybe even more of the Obama years, as that's about a decade ago. You don't want to get too recent because then you don't have that perspective that a historian needs to really look at the facts and not feel political bias about it, or have fond memories of, so let's say if you really liked Donald Trump, you'd probably take the facts and teach him like he was excellent. You couldn't really get that perspective. And I'm not saying he isn't excellent. I'm just saying, it's hard to get perspective the more recent you get, to where you get into current events and it's not truly history at that point. But every year I try and add a little bit more in there. Fantastic. That is it. Wow, that was a long video. But we endured it. We got through it. There's U.S. history, the end of the notes for the school year. You did it. You won't have to worry about notes for U.S. history until probably your freshman year of college now. So congratulations, guys. I guess that's it. Yeah, I got nothing else. Peace out. Have a good day. I guess I could have said that. Have a nice day. Peace out.